Dexter didn't outsmart the cops, he just took advantage of how bad they were with technology. It's hard to believe that a show about a blood spatter analyst who is also a serial killer can make the most unrealistic part, the cleanliness of the tech. But here we are, 8 seasons into Dexter, and somehow no one in Miami Metro has figured out what a login password is. Characters in the show casually look through each other's computers as if they were public library terminals. Need proof that someone did something wrong? Just move the mouse around. There is no lock screen, no password, and no way to stop it. In this bloody world, it seems like digital security doesn't exist, or the writers just didn't want to deal with it. To be fair, this wasn't completely wrong for the middle of the 2000s. Before 2010, everyday people had to deal with a lot of problems with cybersecurity, like using post-it notes as passwords and trusting their coworkers not to be criminals. Most people left their devices as open as their browser history unless their company had a separate IT department with strict rules. But Dexter isn't really looking through grandma's email. He's getting into computers at the police department. One would think that a big city police department would have, say, basic digital rules in place. Instead, he can delete evidence from Masuka's workstation or log into Deb's computer by guessing the password. "Harry," he says after a car crash. Bingo! It seems that all you need to get into secret police files is a little amnesia and a sad story. The show sometimes acts like passwords are real. LaGuerta types hers in one scene, and there's a time when Quinn can't get to Dexter's files. But these are only short moments of realism in a world where technology is not taken seriously. And what about when Dexter saves as new to hide what he's done? That wouldn't hide the original file, it would just sit next to it like a digital gun. Don't forget about physical security either. When Dexter walks through a crime scene, there are either no cameras or they are conveniently blind. There are no Ring doorbells, motion sensors, or even a neighbor with a suspicious poodle who is too nosy. Of course, technology changed quickly after 2010, and home surveillance became more common later. But even then, Dexter's Miami seems to be in a different universe where privacy is very important, unless you're being killed. In the end, the lack of digital security isn't a mistake in the plot, it's a necessary part of the plot. Half of the show's tension would go away if the characters really locked their screens or used two-factor authentication. But it's still funny, if not totally crazy, to see a forensic expert easily outsmart an entire police department with nothing but his gut feeling, a USB stick, and the fact that no one in this precinct seems to know what cybersecurity is. They've been telling us who the Ripper is since episode 1, you just chose not to see it. Speculation about the identity of the New York Ripper has turned into a conspiracy buffet, with theories ranging from the somewhat plausible to the completely crazy. It seems like everyone is a suspect, and by everyone, we mean everyone who has ever been in the frame. First, let's talk about the bellhop. Yes, the man who only carries bags is now being called a sadistic killer who is hiding in plain sight. What better way to hide your plans to kill than to offer free turn-down service? He is said to have endless victims to choose from and a perfect hunting ground. When you think of strategic serial killers, you probably picture someone folding towels behind the front desk. Then there's the theory that really changes the game. Rita. Not only is she alive again, but she's also working as a killer with LaGuerta and Jonah by her side, making what looks like a suburban kill squad. Why not add the Tooth Fairy to the list? Of course, some people think it's someone we've never seen before. It's exciting TV when you spend a whole season following false leads only to find out it was Ted from accounting all along. One theory says the male detective might be working with the Ripper, which makes him look bad. An oddly cut sleeve is the last thing you want to see on a covert psychopath. It seems like a tactical choice to make it easier to use a murder weapon. If it's true, it's either very smart or very stupid, depending on how many drinks you've had. Albert Chung, the Scranton Strangler, and Dexter's secret second brother, at this point, it's a casting call for every shady guy with a line to say. What's wrong with you? Might be the only thing that makes sense to say. And then there's the real contender, Al Walker, or maybe Rapunzel. This theory really does try to be logical. The killer's cruelty, anonymity, and strange habit of escaping cleanly all fit with Walker's strange behavior. He won't talk about his past, might have made up his family photos, and knows when to leave. Most of these other suspects don't seem to be guilty of much more than that, being there. Even the most believable theories have to deal with the 5-year gap in the Ripper's timeline. If the killer has been sleeping for that long, it makes more sense for him to be someone we know, like Walker, than another last-minute plot device with a name tag. Lastly, let's not forget the last desperate guess, Chicky Hines. When everything else fails, throw in the wild card and hope no one notices that the writers are out of ideas. In short, suspects can be anything from well hidden to very easy to find. The writers might be more dangerous than the Ripper himself, depending on how they choose to show him. Dexter was dead. Then they brought him back, and somehow they didn't ruin everything. Against all odds, Dexter, Resurrection gives us the rarest thing on TV, a revival that doesn't make us feel bad. Instead of dragging along on the decaying remains of past glory, it moves forward with a clear goal, great casting, and a premise so crazy that it becomes brilliant again. Dexter lives in New York. Peter Dinklage plays a crazy bad guy, Uma Thurman, a party for serial killers. It shouldn't work, but it really does. Unlike New Blood before it, Resurrection knows that a legacy character like Dexter can't just be brought out of retirement for a few moody monologues and a plot that isn't fully cooked. This time, the writers remembered that Dexter Morgan is only interesting when there is chaos around him, and Resurrection puts him in the middle of a fire. Peter Dinklage's performance as the bad guy is nothing short of insane genius. Seeing him fall apart in a role that has nothing to do with his usual serious tone is like seeing a Shakespearean actor let loose in a scary funhouse. It's unrecognizable in the best way, and it's a rare treat to see an actor of his caliber really enjoy the craziness. The show doesn't just go for the crazy, it builds a penthouse suite there. The serial killer party, which sounds like something that would have been thrown out of a Saw script for being too silly, is done with such confidence that it somehow becomes a high point. Yes, it's a fever dream, but one that is well planned. Then there's the cast. Honestly, the ensemble is stacked. Standing next to Michael C. Hall and not looking like background noise is a real skill, but Resurrection does it. The show kills off characters, like the much missed Mia, but it does so for a reason. It shows a more measured, calculating Dexter who has finally learned from years of bloody mistakes. For those who are still upset about the bad landing of New Blood, yes, it had problems, but it wasn't a total failure. It set the stage for this Resurrection, though not very well, and with Resurrection, that foundation finally pays off. This is the spiritual sequel that New Blood wanted to be but couldn't quite make it, and now, for some reason, Dexter is back on track. Even though Original Sin didn't get a lot of attention at first, it brings back the Miami heat of the original series with enough style to be worth watching. But don't get me wrong, Resurrection is the best part of Dexter's afterlife, the best of the offshoots. It might even be the best since the height of the original Dexter. All it took was New York, a few fresh corpses, and Peter Dinklage going completely crazy. The TV show lied to you. Dexter's real story involves ancient gods, mutilated cops, and a completely different ending. For anyone who thought the TV version of Dexter was dark, get ready. The original book series takes that darkness, adds absurdity, and sets it on fire. The Dexter in the books isn't just a charmingly twisted vigilante with a code. He's a truly cold, emotionless predator who thinks that family bonding means teaching kids how to let their inner monsters out. You read that correctly. In the books, Dexter doesn't just put up with Aster and Cody. He trains them to handle their own dark passengers, with a little help from his long-lost, not-so-dead brother Brian. It looks like Brian didn't die young like he did in the show. Instead, he stays long enough to teach the kids himself, and in the end, he dies heroically while saving Aster, Cody, and Deborah's son from a cartel. Dexter dies too, but only after going on a rampage to protect what he thinks is his property. After all, nothing says fatherly love, like crazy possessiveness disguised as redemption. If you only know Dexter from the Showtime show, this might come as a surprise. The show only bought the rights to the first book, and then it went in its own clean, emotionally complicated direction. The books, on the other hand, turn into a surreal mythology about dark passengers, who are ancient demigods created by a being from before time called Moloch. That Moloch, yes, the one who once possessed King Solomon. It was clear that subtlety was not on the menu. The supporting characters are treated in a very different way. Sergeant Dokes isn't just looking at you suspiciously from the background. He's been kidnapped by a crazy Haitian war criminal who plays hangman with his arms and legs. He is little more than a meat puzzle with most of his arms, legs, and face missing by the time they find him. That's the second book. Welcome to the book version of Dexter, where the horror is more like a fever dream with a lot of dead bodies than a psychological thriller. But even though Book Dexter is cold and detached like a reptile, he does have a reason for doing what he does. He reacts with pure, selfish anger when his surrogate family is in danger, not out of love or loyalty. After all, they're his. And even though he was happy to leave them a book earlier, someone taking them away is an unforgivable crime. It has more to do with possession than love, but it adds a strange twist to his otherwise clinical detachment. Imagining Dexter, Brian, and Deborah as a dysfunctional Justice League is almost funny, but that's part of what makes the book series so great. It embraces the silly. The books go even further than the show when it comes to Dexter's lack of morality. They add just enough twisted protectiveness to make readers wonder if monsters can have a heart, even if it only beats for their own reflection. No, the book version of Dexter isn't more complicated than the show. He is just colder, stranger, and much more fun because he doesn't try to hide it. He doesn't want to be saved. He is just making his claim. Bringing Lumen back could ruin the one character or arc that this show got right. Dexter fans are always wanting to bring back not just the main character, but anyone who is interesting enough to stand next to him for a while. For example, there is a lot of talk about bringing Lumen Pierce back. Yes, that Lumen, the vigilante who followed the main character around in Season 5 and left the show with her dignity and emotional arc intact. Of course, it's hard not to want to pull her back in. But should they? It's clear why people are interested. Lumen was one of the few people who knew Dexter's dark secret and didn't run away in fear. She got him, fought with him, and most importantly, she left on her own terms. That alone makes her one of the best. So, yes, one could picture her return bringing a small sense of comfort and familiarity to Dexter's dark, lonely world. She sees him in a crowd and reaches out to remind him that not all connections have to end in violence. There is something interesting there. It looks poetic on paper. But here's the problem. If her return isn't done right, it doesn't make sense. No one wants to hear a lazy, "Hey, remember Lumen? It's Lumen" cameo thrown in for cheap nostalgia points. Her story ended with a clear and emotional ending. She killed the men who hurt her, realized she didn't need revenge anymore, and left Dexter. She didn't hate him, she just knew what it would mean to stay. It was grown up, sad, and believable. A rare clean cut in a series full of problems and dead bodies. That being said, there are ways to include her without ruining her story. A one-time appearance where she talks about her trauma in front of a crowd and hints at the mysterious person who helped her without naming Dexter could have a big impact. Let Dexter watch from the shadows, remembering what he used to mean to someone. That would be a satisfying nod that doesn't bring her back into the killing fields. And while it's easy to say that no one gets through what Lumen did without long-term effects, and yes, that trauma would last forever, this is exactly why it feels wrong to bring her back as a killer. She was not like Dexter. She wasn't born with a desire for blood, and she wasn't taught how to feed it. Her violence was based on her past and what she needed to do. It stopped when her mission was over. That was the point. Could what she went through have changed her? Of course. But that doesn't mean she has to go back to Dexter's orbit like a B-list superhero. The show doesn't have to use her trauma to give him a new partner or love interest. Her leaving worked because it wasn't about Dexter. Dexter! It was about her getting back in charge. For those who want to see her again, maybe a compromise. She shows up for a short time, helps Dexter with a lead, and then disappears again. There are no strings attached, and it's just a flashback to the past. If done right, it could add to the story without making hers less valuable. But let's not act like bringing her back full-time makes sense. Her story isn't unfinished, it's done. She was never supposed to be Dexter's long-term love or partner in crime. Are you going to bring her back just to kill her, turn her into a monster, or re-traumatize her to build tension? That would be both lazy and disgusting. It's best to leave some stories alone at the end. Lumen's is one of them. If you skipped Dexter thinking it was just another crime show, you played yourself. Apparently, you have to wait for a global pandemic, a seasonal flu, or just plain boredom to finally sit down and press play on a show that's been sitting in the to-watch pile for years. Enter Dexter, the critically acclaimed bloody gem that somehow stayed hidden from so many people for so long. 3 seasons in, the question isn't, is this show good? But, what kind of cultural amnesia let me ignore it for so long? This isn't just a good show, it's a high-functioning sociopath of a series that slowly pulls you in and won't let you go. The first season was a slow burn, but by the second season, you can't stop watching and 12 hours have gone by. Your immune system is now only relying on adrenaline, and Michael C. Hall's smirk? Dexter isn't perfect, of course. It has some problems, especially in the later arcs, as everyone knows. But even its problems are interesting. You sit there and think, yes, that scene was crazy. And then you click next episode without even blinking. The books are another thing that keeps getting deeper. Yes, Dexter is based on a series of books. Whether or not you should read them depends on how much you can handle bad writing. Some readers like that the novels add to the world, while others think they are a weak echo of the show's twisted brilliance. No matter what, they're there for you to take or ignore. And just when you think you've caught up, someone says, new blood, or resurrection, and all of a sudden, there's more to deal with. More Dexter, more death, and more inner monologues set against Miami's spooky sunsets. It goes on, and that's the best part. If you're just finding out about the show, welcome to the club. You're late, but you're not the only one. There are bloody walls and a strange little party. Just how we like it. Dexter didn't get away because he was careful. He got away because the cops were lazy. You'd think that in a show where the main character is a forensics expert who moonlights as a meticulous serial killer, there would be a little more discretion. But once again, Dexter Morgan seems set on ruining his own legacy, with a strange mix of impulsiveness and pride. Let's get the facts straight. Dexter did take the bloodslide trophies from Prater's creepy vault, which was a shrine to serial killers. It had a labeled pedestal that called Dokes the Bay Harbor Butcher. That's not just evidence, it's almost a confession. Of course, the police end up breaking into the vault. What does Dexter do then? He gets rid of the only physical evidence that links him to his years of murder. This makes sense from his point of view, but is done with all the subtlety of a spotlight. A display with a collection of serial killer memorabilia, now without the BHB's most famous trophies, should make the average detective raise an eyebrow. But these aren't your average detectives. Claudette and Melvin, who may be smart enough to figure things out, are busy with the New York Ripper case. Instead, it's probably a glory hound detective who is more interested in getting media attention than doing real investigative work who will do the job. Angel Batista is still a wild card, though. People have called his long-held suspicion that Dexter is the Bay Harbor Butcher a conspiracy theory, but he did talk to Claudette and Melvin directly. The call history doesn't go away, even if they don't answer. Angel called Harrison the day he died. The calls were long, and the cell phone company can, and probably will, keep records of them. That should at least make you a little curious. Dexter's bad decisions don't end with the trophies. He also took a bag and a knife, which could have been tools or just more breadcrumbs for a detective who was paying attention. There is some debate about whether the slide pedestal really had a plaque on it, but the fact that the Bay Harbor Butcher's trophies used to sit there should have been enough to raise alarms. Some people might say that Dexter smartly put the New York Ripper file front and center in the vault as a way to throw Claudette off track or as a peace offering, but this still seems like a stretch. If the goal was to distract people, why not make the whole scene about the Ripper and get rid of all the BHB? The vault's most famous trophies, on the other hand, go missing the same night that the only person accusing Dexter dies in the building. It isn't a clean story, and the last thing that sealed the deal was the murder weapon. Prater is the one who did it, and his fingerprints are all over it. The case is closed, right? The man who was obsessed with Dexter ends up dead, apparently killed by another fan who is also obsessed. Keep going. There is nothing to see here, except that there is a lot to see. The BHB slides are no longer there. The Ripper file, which is easy to ignore, the call log that hasn't been fixed, and a growing pile of strange things that anyone should find suspicious. But Dexter's safety depends less on how smart he is, and more on how lazy and distracted the people around him are. The most unbelievable part might be that everyone hated the Dexter finale, until New Blood quietly fixed it. Halfway through New Blood, it's clear that this show is much better than it should be. And no, it shouldn't be called Dexter anymore. It's Jim now. He's quiet, wrapped in flannel, and brooding in the snow. Despite all odds, this surprise sequel series not only makes up for the bad taste left by Season 8, but it also makes sense for it to exist. The show does well in its new setting, which is a small town that is cold and quiet, which is a perfect fit for Dexter's new lifestyle. This time, he's not easily avoiding the consequences, and that slow unraveling adds a nice amount of tension to the story. Adding Harrison works surprisingly well, thanks in large part to the actor's strong performance. This is one of the few times in this franchise that a teenage character doesn't feel like a plot device with problems. Angel Batista is back, but to be honest, his presence is more of a bother than a pleasure. It's hard to cheer for someone who looks like they want to destroy the delicate balance that the show works so hard to build. He's like that one overzealous party guest who shows up just when things are starting to calm down. But it works. Everything is coming together, from the new characters who fit into the story, yes, even in a made-up Dexter universe set in New York City, to the pacing, tone, and surprisingly clear storytelling. This isn't just fixing things, it's really going back to how things used to be. New Blood is the 4th best season in the series, behind only the holy trinity of 2, 4, and 1. It brings back the dark, morally ambiguous charm that made Dexter so interesting in the past, but it doesn't feel like it's trying too hard to hold on to its past success. And no, the hate for Harrison never made sense. He acts like a teen because, plot twist, he is one. Think about that. The only real crime here is that ending that had to happen. But for a short, wonderful time, New Blood reminded everyone why this story was worth telling in the first place. Subscribe for more breakdown.